Hey guys, what's going on? It's Jay, and in this video I'm going to show you what different lenses do on crop factor cameras such as the Sony A6700 in this case, but we got the Sony ZV-E10, future models, A6400, A6600. So anyways, what I'm using right now is the older kit lens, which is the 18 to 55 millimeter kit lens. So it's a variable aperture zoom lens. What that means is the aperture right now at 18 millimeter is at f3.5. Now watch when I zoom in. So now it's at f4 and I'm at like 30 millimeter approximately. If I go all the way to 55, the aperture is now at f5.6. So notice, because of the higher focal length, 55 millimeter, you can see how the background is starting to look pretty blurry back there. So that blurry background is called depth of field. So right now the camera is focused on my face. I'm about 4 feet away from the camera. And you could see at f5.6 we actually are getting pretty good background separation here, which is cool. So now watch what happens when we put some different lenses on. So what we got here is the Sigma 30mm f1.4 lens. And yeah, I have it at f1.4, so the aperture is much larger than the kit lens that you were just looking at. And you saw the kit lens at about 30mm f4. So this is 30mm f1.4, and you can see the background blur is just absolutely awesome. So that blurry background is more reminiscent of a full frame look, and this lens is really great for inside a studio because right now I'm about 3 feet away from the front of the lens. I'm touching it. So at this distance you can get really good headshots if you're talking to the camera, and you can get a nice blurry background inside your studio. If you're outside, you can get really blurry backgrounds depending on how far the background is relative to you and the camera, for example. So the farther the background, the blurrier it's going to look. Now another thing to keep in mind is when using a fast aperture lens like this, the shutter speed is going to go way up. So right now my shutter speed is at 1/1000th of a second. So to combat that shutter speed problem, they make these things called ND filters, and this is actually a variable ND filter. So when you turn it, as you can see here, it gets darker. So you can see how it's getting darker, and then it'll get lighter. So now you can see through it. It looks clear, pretty much almost clear. So this is a variable ND filter, and what that does is it acts as sunglasses for your camera, and it'll slow the shutter speed down. Rule of thumb wise, you want to pretty much be double what the frame rate is. So right now I'm recording at 4K 24, so I would want the frame rate to be 1/48th of a second ideally, but on a camera like this I can only pick 1/50th of a second. Some of the more video oriented cameras will offer 1/48th of a second, for example. But anyways, the ND filter is the key tool to do that, because if you want to be at f1.4 and it's bright outside, your shutter speed is going to be way too fast and the footage is going to look a little bit jittery. So again, this is actually the Nisi True Color. I'll have a link for it below in the description area. I've used many different ND filters, and I think this one is one of the best options as far as skin tones and the sky looking correct and everything like that. So another thing to keep in mind when it comes to buying the variable ND filters is the size of the filter. So I would get one that's big enough for all of your lenses. And then you can get these, which are called step-down rings. They come in a variety of sizes. You can actually get a kit that comes with like a whole stack of them, and that will allow you to adapt the larger ND filter to smaller lenses. I actually already have a step-down on right now, so you can just stack these up to make it fit whatever lens you're using, as long as it's smaller. So like I said, I usually would go for a pretty large one depending on what your largest lens is. I would get that size and then get the stepper ring kit so you can step it down to all your other lenses when recording video. So this way you only have to buy one high quality ND filter as opposed to buying one for every lens. Alright guys, so now I moved back just a little further from the camera because I'm using the 56mm f1.4 lens from Sigma. So now look at this background separation. So you saw the kit lens a minute ago, which was 55mm at f5.6. This is 56mm at f1.4, and it offers way better background separation. Now the downside, arguably, if you wanted to use this in your studio, is the camera's going to have to be significantly further away. So right now, again, the camera's like 5-6 feet away from where I'm standing, and this is, you know, the frame. If I move further back, you can see how the background starts to, you know, get more detail and so forth. So that fast aperture is what gives you that killer background separation. And again, I really should have an ND filter on here because my shutter speed is at 1/800th of a second. But because I'm changing so many lenses, I don't want to have to put all those adapters on, so I'm being kind of lazy. So I'm a little closer to the lens this time. As you can see, I'm touching the lens right now. So this is a 23mm f1.4 Viltrox lens, as it turns out in this case. So a very affordable option, just like the Sigma lenses, very fast max aperture f1.4, and 23mm will allow you to get significantly closer. So this would be another good option for inside the studio where you're pretty close to the camera and doing talking head stuff, type stuff like this. So if you're a little further back, you can get away with using the 30mm. If you're further back, you can get the 56mm, for example. So I just wanted to show you what the 23 looks like. And as you can see, you can get some really good background separation with this lens as well. Very affordable, and these are all autofocus lenses, of course, so they're all tracking my eye. They're all compatible with that. Alright guys, so now what I'm using is actually a really underrated lens in my opinion. It's the Sony 16mm f2.8 prime lens. Now it's a pancake style lens, which means it's like really thin. It's a tiny little lens. It weighs almost nothing. I'll show you what it looks like in the studio. But it's got a decent max aperture of f2.8 and the lens is very affordable, but like I said, it's so compact and lightweight that it's almost like carrying the camera without a lens on it. You could literally put the camera and lens in your jacket pocket with a lens like this because it's so small. Alright guys, so now I got an 11mm lens mounted to the A6700 and you can see how close I am to the camera. I'm right in front of the camera. It looks like I'm 5-6 feet away. It's just because of how wide of a view this lens is. You can see if I put my fingers out, you get a little bit of that stretching effect because the lens is just so wide. So if I move back a little bit, this is about 12 feet away or so. This is what it looks like at about 12 feet. If I move a little closer, it's about 6 feet away. So you can see I can get really close to this lens. So now the camera is literally, my face is about this far from the camera, so about 1.5 feet, not even, about 1 foot. You can see you're going to get a little bit of that perspective distortion. So this is, if you're really close to the camera talking, it kind of brings you into the scene a little bit because my face is just so close. You can like barely see my ears because just the distortion, almost like using like a GoPro or something. It gives you that really wide angle view. And this has a decent max aperture of f1.8, so you do get a little bit of background blur there, and it'll be helpful in lower light situations. All right guys, I got a couple more lenses I want to show you, so let's move on to those, shall we? If you can see right now, this is the 13mm f1.4. I'm now touching the lens, so that's how far I am from the camera. So I'm like arm's length away. And this is 13mm f1.4. I have stabilization turned off, so there's no cropping going in or anything like that. I'm on a tripod. So this is just straight up 13mm. You can see how that background blur, and this is that 13mm f1.4. So you're getting the wide angle view and that super fast aperture that will get that nice blurry background that you're seeing right now. I also have skin smoothing on set to medium. I kind of like it. So if I back up a little bit, now I'm about 10 feet away. And this is what the view is. So again, you can see it's going to focus on my face. That's the background. Pretty cool. All right, guys, so now we're looking at the 27mm Viltrox lens. Now this is an f1.2 lens, and just look at the background separation. It's incredible. You can see if I move aside a little bit, just look at the trail. I mean, it's very impressive in my opinion. This looks very cinematic to me. And again, these lenses are so affordable, so fast. Game-changing type technology in the last few years. It used to be you spend, you know, a decent amount of money on a camera body, but you really invest in the lenses, you know, like glass is everything, glass is everything. Well, that's starting to not become the case because these type of lenses are so good, it's really hard to justify shelling out that extra cash. Now, one thing that is important is if you're shooting sports, because these lenses, as great as they are, they're not going to be able to keep up with high-speed sports or high-speed moving subjects just because of the autofocus system inside the lens is not as good as like the high-quality lenses coming from Sony in particular. They have like dual linear autofocus motors and it's far superior. But with that being said, this keeps up in like normal situations, no problem at all. So as long as you're not doing that specific thing, these are a great option. And you know, I'm loving them. I use them all the time now because I just love that background separation and it just looks more cinematic, attracts the eye. You get much more 3D pop, things like that. So 3D pop is like how I'm like popping off the background, like the subject, you know, it gives you like this depth. So let me change lenses one more time. I got two more I want to show you. All right, guys, so this is a 55mm f1.8 lens. Now, this is a Zeiss lens, so this actually is a Sony lens. It's full frame, but it's very old, so you can find them on eBay extremely cheap. Now, this lens I absolutely love. It has the T-Star lens coatings. And it's just the optics of it. Like the way the background renders is very, very good, in my opinion, with this lens. I just really like the way it looks in that regard. It also has very, very good like micro contrast, so it just has like a really nice look to it. I'll leave my review for this lens linked because you have to check out the sample photos. I've taken thousands of photos with this lens with various cameras, and it's an incredible optic, especially for the money if you buy it used like on eBay or something. So worth looking into. Let me move on to the next lens. All right, guys, so this is the biggest and largest lens in this test that I'm doing here for you guys today. So this is actually 75 millimeters f1.2 is what you're seeing. So I have to be quite a bit further back from the camera. I'm about 10 feet away now, and it looks like the 27 millimeter did approximately at like 5 feet, but you can see the background separation is unbelievable with this lens. If I move a little closer, you'll see what I'm saying. So just killer background butter. I mean, it just, you don't even know what's going on back there. It completely separates. Like if I move back a little bit, you'll get a little more detail. But even from here, you know, just that background separation is so killer. So this is an excellent option for professional portraits and stuff like that. I would use this lens for portrait photography in particular. I use it for product photography as well. On a budget, 75 millimeters f1.2, you got to think about the 85 millimeter f1.2 lenses, you know, that Canon and Sony and other companies make. I don't know if Sony has a 1.2 yet, but anyway, those lenses are ludicrous. They're like $2,500. This lens is way less than that. And again, real world performance, you could see right here, it's incredible. All right, guys, so just for reference, I'm recording with the Sony a7 IV, and I have the Sony 35mm f1.8 lens at f1.8 with a variable ND filter on it, and I have my teleprompter in front of it, and that's what I'm recording with. Now, right here is the Sony a6700, and I'm going to mount the various lenses that will work in the studio just to show you guys what it looks like. For example, this is the 18 to 55 millimeter kit lens. Now this is like a discontinued lens, but more importantly, I just want to show you what a kit lens looks like compared to like a specialty prime lens, which is pretty much what all these other lenses are. So this is a variable aperture zoom lens. All right, so here we are recording with the a6700. Now this camera is a little bit lower than the a7 IV, so I have to just look down slightly, no big deal. I have it on my desk as far back on the desk as it could go. So the front of the lens is right here. I'm touching it, you can see. So that's how far it is. So this is what you could expect from 18 millimeter on a crop factor camera inside a studio environment. So you can see the background blur that you're getting and stuff. Now if I zoom in a little bit, you can probably get away with somewhere right around here. It's approximately like 30 probably, something like that. And if I go all the way to 55, to use 55 in the studio, I would have to have the camera way further back. It's not always practical. It's very easy with a zoom lens to just show you the difference. Now let me show you what these fast aperture primes will yield you. I'm going to go in the same order that we did in the real world footage. First up is the Sigma 30mm f1.4 lens. You can see it right here. It's a very nice lens. So the Sigma lens goes for about $340 retail in the United States. All right, so here's 30mm at f1.4, and you can see the background blur there is looking pretty good. See the photo behind me, the painting that Layla drew. And if I get closer, you know, stuff will get more blurry, right? The closer you are to the camera and the further the background is, the more blurry it's going to be. So you can see when you look through my doorway at the spirally staircase and the lights and stuff, it gets blurrier and blurrier the further you get back. So again, at this distance, 30mm is pretty much as tight as I would go. When I was using the a6400 for years as my studio camera, I was using the 30mm f1.4 lens. That's the studio lens I chose to use because I like this look. All right, so the next lens I did in the real world was the 56mm. I'm not going to do that because it's just going to be too tight in the studio here. Now, here's what the 56mm looks like. It looks very similar to the 30mm. It's just a little bit fatter and a little bit shorter, like in length. And the filter thread is 55mm on the 56mm f1.4 lens, and this lens goes for approximately $480. So depending when it's on sale, you can save like $100 off, so just keep that in mind, but the retail is $480 US for the 56mm Sigma. All right, so next up we have the Viltrox 23mm f1.4 lens. Now this lens actually goes for about $280, which is an incredible value. Again, US, when it's on sale, the prices vary a little bit depending on where you live. But this is what she looks like. It's a nice lens. It's got pretty good build. It also has the manual aperture ring, which is quite nice. A little bit more of an advanced feature. Alright, so this is what 23mm looks like, f1.4 in the studio environment. And if you notice, if you look at the A7 IV for a second and just look at like the framing, the 23 is very similar at this distance. You know, it's still cropped in a little bit more than 35, but it's a good like studio look in my opinion, 23mm. So that's specifically for talking headshots that I prefer, mind you. You guys might want a way wider view, which you will see in a second. But just from my perspective, you could see what my A7 IV looks like. That's how I prefer it. So this is very close as far as, you know, focal length and stuff like that. So this would be another good option to use on the crop factor camera for lower light environments, studio stuff that you're looking at right now. And it works good. The IAF and everything works pretty good, so I'm impressed by it overall. Alright, so this next lens is by far the lightest weight and smallest lens in this test, and this is the Sony 16mm f2.8 pancake lens. It's got a 49mm filter thread and it goes for about $250 US. But again, you can find these way cheaper when they're on sale and when they're on eBay and stuff like that. I think this is an underrated lens. I really like using this lens for those super lightweight situations. I used to take it with me on the trail when I was going mountain biking and stuff to record mountain bike footage because the lens was so lightweight and still wide enough and fast enough that it just was a great option for that type of stuff. So it just depends on what you're doing, you know? Mountain biking, you need a really lightweight camera that you're carrying while riding a bike. So a lens like this is like ideal for that scenario. I mean, of course, an f1.4 faster aperture lens would be nice to have, but you're carrying that weight while riding. So it's just a matter of what you're doing. All right, so here is the 16mm f2.8 view. And again, keep in mind, guys, I am not moving the camera. It is at the same exact spot for every one of these lenses that I'm putting on in the studio here. So not bad, right? Now this lens doesn't have the same, you know, micro contrast and stuff. It's got that like a little bit more of like a washed out look when you're shooting into light like that. But for the money and the size, compactness of this lens, it's really not bad. And again, you can pick them up so cheap. It's just one of those super lightweight options. You could literally put the camera in your pocket because the lens sticks out only a little bit more than the grip on the A6700, for example. So anyways, 16mm f2.8. Let's move on to the next one. All right, guys, so the next lens I want to show you is the Yongnuo 11mm f1.8 lens. Now this is extremely wide angle. It goes for approximately $300 US, which is very affordable, and it has a lot of features. It's got the manual aperture ring, got a focus hold button here that you can custom program, and it has two different modes for manual focus, autofocus. Also has a remote control where you can control this lens, the focus of the lens if you wanted to. Now you can see here it's got a pretty large front element there. It's got a 58mm filter thread. Alright, so here's what the 11mm looks like, and this is at f1.8, so you can see just how wide of a view you get. It looks like I'm much further away from the camera, but I didn't move. The camera's in the same spot as it was the whole time. So 11mm is pretty sweet, and you know, this lens has a lot of features on it with that manual aperture ring. The one thing I don't like about the manual aperture ring, though, is it doesn't have a lock on it. I wish it did. So occasionally it will turn off auto, and it'll be like a f16 or something, and you have to turn the aperture ring back to auto. But other than that, this is a really good option. And again, wide angle view is insane on this lens, so if you guys need something like that, this is a good option to consider for tight quarters, like inside a studio like this. If you want to show your whole desk and stuff, this is a really good option. If I pick it up, you could see how much more of the studio you can see, you know? It's just like massive, like the view that you get with this type of lens. Alright guys, the next lens we're going to look at is the Viltrox 13mm f1.4 lens. Now, it's very well built. It has the manual aperture ring. It just feels beefy. It's got a lot of metal in the construction. So here we go. Here's what 13mm f1.4 looks like on the A6700 in the studio. And you should see some decent background blur, but again, a very wide angle view. So the 13mm has a 67mm filter thread, so keep that in mind if you're buying ND filters and stuff. And you can see the wide angle view. It's not quite as extreme as 11mm, but it's still pretty darn wide. Alright guys, so just to be clear, the 13mm f1.4 lens goes for about $460, And if you buy it at the Viltrox store, you get like a discount code. If you use my name to save like 8%, Jason Herman, it'll be in the description area. I think I messed the price up on this lens, so I just had to re-record this segment. Sorry about that. All right, guys, so this is 55mm, so I'm not going to put it on here in the studio because it's just too much of a telephoto. But this is the one I showed you outside in the woods there. This is that Zeiss T-Star 55mm f1.8 lens. Absolute gorgeous lens. Really, really huge fan of this lens. Can't recommend it enough. This is actually a full frame lens though, just to let you guys know. All the other ones that we were working with today are crop factor lenses. So of course you can use full frame lenses on the A6700 as well, but they tend to be larger and heavier. In this case, this one's not larger and heavier. It's just awesome. So that's why I'm bringing it in with this test. All right, guys, so I got the 27mm Viltrox lens here now, and this lens goes for a bit more. It goes for $545 US retail. And it's just a beast. It's got the Pro badge on there, so it's a very, very high quality lens. It has a lot of features, autofocus, manual focus. It's got a very good build quality. It's got the rubber gasket on the back. Again, it's a pro grade lens from Viltrox. Let me show you what it looks like on the A6700 in the studio here. All right, guys, so this is what 27mm f1.2 looks like on the A6700. And you can see the background blur is pretty darn impressive, especially if I move to the side and you look back there. It's incredible. So this is what you can expect with the Viltrox lens. And it's going to be the last lens I'm going to show you here in the lab because the 75mm and like I said, the 55mm Zeiss they're just too tight for the studio for this test. So 27mm, I wouldn't really go too much further than the 30mm Sigma I showed you before for inside a studio environment. All right, so again, 27mm. All right, guys, so I just wanted to show you what the 75mm f1.2 lens looks like. And you can see it's quite large. It's got a 77mm filter thread. So again, the ND filter situation, 77, if that's your biggest lens, might be the filter size you go with. And then you can use those step-down rings like we were talking about earlier. So anyways, this is a pro lens, just like the 27mm. The build quality is pretty much the same exact design. Very, very nice. Nice big focus ring on here. Now, the downside to these pro lenses are they are big and heavy, so you might not want that, but they do perform absolutely incredible as you saw in the field outside before. So another key spec to lenses when it comes to buying lenses for your studio, for portrait work, for whatever you're doing, in particular, is the minimum focus distance. It's one of the key specs that I always look for when it comes to lenses. And what minimum focus distance means in the real world is how close you can get to your subject when you're taking a photo. So you've probably heard of macro lenses and stuff. Macro lenses are specifically designed to allow you to get very close to your subject when taking photos, but non-macro lenses also have a minimum focus distance. So you guys know I have this lab back here, Sony Alpha Lab and all that. So I love doing minimum focus distance testing whenever I get a new lens. So I just wanted to go through the lenses that we tested in this video quick, just to show you the minimum focus distance of each lens. So first, here's the 18 to 55mm kit lens. Now I want to show you this lens first because this is the lens that I used in the real world test when we were on the bridge there and stuff. So the minimum focus distance for this lens is 9.84 inches or about 25 centimeters. So this is at 18mm here, and this is at 55mm. So you can see 55mm is looking pretty good, and 18mm. Remember, it's a variable aperture, so it's f3.5 at this focal distance, and at 55 it's f5.6. All right, guys, so here is the Sigma 30mm f1.4 lens, which has a minimum focus distance of about 12 inches or 30 centimeters. So you can see with this lens you can get very close to your subject. Now here is the Sigma 56mm lens. Now you can't get quite as close with this lens. We're looking at 1.6 feet or about 50 centimeters with the 56mm. Now if we go to the 23mm Viltrox, it's pretty much the same as the Sigma, which is about 30 centimeters or 12 inches, but because it's 23mm, it doesn't look quite as zoomed in. So still not bad, pretty darn good separation if you ask me, especially for a slightly wider view. Now here we're looking at the 16mm f2.8 lens. Now this is that pancake lens, the really small one that I showed you. And you can see here, not too bad, you know, pretty wide angle. The background blur is decent. The minimum focus distance is about 9.5 inches or 24 centimeters. So again, not that bad. If you're getting really close to stuff, you can get a nice blurry background, as you can see here. Now the next lens is the Yongnuo, I'm not exactly sure how to pronounce that name, 11mm f1.8 lens, and the minimum focus distance for this lens is about 5.9 inches or 15 centimeters. So you can see here you can get really close to your subjects and get nice blurry backgrounds with that f1.8 max aperture. Now next we have the Viltrox 13mm 1.4 lens, and that has about an 8.7 inch or 22 centimeter minimum focus distance, and you can see here pretty nice background separation you can get for sure. So next we have the Viltrox 27mm f1.2 lens. Now this has a minimum focus distance of about the same as the Sigma 30mm, so we're looking at 11 inches or about 28 centimeters or so. And you can see that offers incredible background separation. Like the background is just completely obliterated. You have no idea what's going on there. You can't even tell it's like my house, you know? So now here is the Sony / Zeiss 55mm f1.8 lens, which I absolutely love. And you can see how that renders here. It has a minimum focus distance it's not the greatest. It's 1.64 feet or about 50 centimeters. Very similar to the Sigma 56mm lens. But again, offers a tremendous background separation regardless. Now here is the 75mm Viltrox. Now this has, I guess you could say, the worst minimum focus distance, but it's not necessarily a good thing or a bad thing. It's just how close you can get to stuff to focus. So you can see the magnification of the quarter isn't the greatest. The magnification is how large the quarter is in reference to like the screen. So the larger the quarter, the more magnification the lens offers. So the 75mm has a minimum focus distance of about 35 inches or 88 centimeters approximately. So the last picture here is actually a lens that I'm currently reviewing. It's the Voigtlander Macro APO Lanthar 65mm f2 lens. This is one of the best lenses I've ever used. It is a manual focus lens and it has macro abilities built into it, but I just took this shot just to show you, you know, there's levels to this game, guys. There's levels to this game. So this is a fully manual lens. This lens actually goes for about $1,000, and I'm working on a long-term review for it. But you could see here a lens that has macro ability. You could get shots like this. Listen, guys, you want a full-frame look, but you don't want a full-frame camera. You can do it with lenses, and this is a really good example of that. Guys, so all the links for these lenses will be in the description area if you want to check out the current prices, because it's hard to say what it's going to be at the time you watch this video with different sales and so forth. And videos like this, I hope, really help visually illustrate what the different lenses do. I'm a visual learner, so videos like this just makes sense to me to like show people, you know, what aperture is, how it works, what focal length does, and how it actually affects the image, you know, and what it looks like in the real world. So I showed you outside on the bridge and in the woods, and then here in the studio, I'll give you a good idea of what, you know, a bunch of the lenses look like in this environment. So again, if you found this helpful, thumbs up, greatly appreciated, and it would be even cooler if you hit that subscribe button as well. I'll catch up with you guys next time. All right, take care.